All right, James, we're going to go over some of these books. I picked these books out because these are from the time period that was very um, interesting, intersection, as they say, in terms of your writing, uh, what people found. This was the time that people started finding out about you. Um, these books basically are what happens after the Baltimore riots of 2015, which seems like a million years ago now. I guess it's 9 years. These books cover that, how things changed in Baltimore, how things were going on. Because also remember, you had the campaign of Trump going on at the time. Uh, a lot of things that was like a real change in a lot of what was going on. I would say for you, for me, for everyone. So we figured we'd just go through these books one at a time. I recommend them. What do you have to say about them?
So the first book, War Drums, this is me writing over a 2 week period about the events of uh, the the purge in Baltimore at the end of April 2015. It was really coordinated by the DOJ, Crip 52, the BGF, that's the Black Guerrilla family, um, and left all but one tiny sector of Baltimore and Baltimore County, two different municipalities, completely unpoliced. The only police present for 10 days in the county was at the Towson Courthouse. So Essex, where I worked at night, was completely unpoliced for 10 days. And where the riots were, where the high school students actually defeated the entire might of the Baltimore Police Department in one afternoon and were eventually rescued by the National Guard. These are the two places where the police were left. So I got to experience living in a completely unpoliced city, and which was being taken over by gangs of teams of 5 men who were clearing the streets and hunting people. So there's stories from two different cab drivers that rescued women that were being set upon by mobs. And both these cab drivers worked at the overnight supermarket where I worked. They drove in the city, but they lived out in the county. So this is a city story told to me at 2:30 in the morning. The one cab driver brought a girl to the store, and her name was Crystal, and we let her sit in the store.
Nice.
The night that the riots really kicked off, I finally got there, and one guy did attempt to get, to get something going with me, but it didn't go his way. The tool that I use, I threw in the river when I was crossing Middle River. Then when I went into the parking lot at Gershbeck's and I showed up a couple hours late, Big Tony, who was the oldest clerk there, collected a couple of bucks from the younger guys who were betting that I wasn't going to make it out of the city into the county. So they were actually having a dead pull on me.
Nice. Great
And they were defending the store with, they broke slats off of pallets. So they kept them in a 5-gallon bucket by the front door, and they all sat up front. And that was the outpost for people in the neighborhood who were being attacked, because people were not just being attacked in Baltimore City. 12 people were killed in Baltimore City during this period. None of those deaths were investigated. I later talked to a lady whose daughter was apparently murdered by members of the Baltimore City Police Department because she kept pushing for an investigation of her brother's death. I met that lady on a plane returning from Utah, I think in 2016 or 2017. I didn't find out until a year later that this was really to get the fentanyl in the pharmacies. You were in town when all the pharmacies got hit at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And the jewelry stores. The regular mob was hitting the liquor store. But the organized stuff was the phone stores, the jewelry stores, and the pharmacies. So at the same time that every pharmacy in Baltimore City and some of them in the county are being looted by 3-person teams, one girl with a smartphone, one dude with a crowbar, going into these pharmacies and getting the fentanyl and other stuff. Something called the mother load that the drug dealers I would hear discussing business on the bus when I was going back and forth through the city and the county was brought in by truck. 1 or more truckloads of heroin was brought into Baltimore because all the surrounding municipalities and the state cops, everybody was defending the BPD down at Mondawmin, which was the area that. And this starts out with a story called the Cornfield. Mondawmin is Algonquin tribal word that means the cornfield. And I put a story in here titled The Cornfield that happened like a week or so before the riots, in which a man fought a man that wanted to steal a bucket of chicken in front of the whole store.
Hell no.
Fought a uniformed, on-duty Baltimore City police officer for that bucket of chicken.
Yeah, wow.
And the chicken went everywhere. Things were getting extremely violent up to the point where Freddie Gray died, and then it was kickoff time. And early on in this book, as we're building up to the riots, there's a lot of discussion about police brutality. On the website, there's a man named Jeremy Bentham. I think he used to have numerous U.S. government jobs. Very back to blue, pro-police guy. He would bust my chops. We had a three-way conversation with him, me, and Incognito. Okay?
Oh, my man.
Okay, and it was about police harassment because the Blair Edison neighborhood is a place where at the very same time, in the late 90s and early aughts, this man who was a teenager then and already had his own business and had his own car was routinely being harassed and stopped by the cops. And guys are trying to rob him because he's a lone dude.
Right.
Okay? And I, who am on foot and are the opposite shade from this young man, and I'm 30 years older than him, I am being harassed by the same cops and attacked by the same guys because we're both outside of the norm. He doesn't fit for what he looks like. He's behaving differently. I'm behaving differently. And it both comes down to the cops hated us because I walked alone and he drove alone in a neighborhood where you don't do that. No black dude drives alone in that neighborhood in that decade, okay? Because he's in too much danger from the cops and he's in too much danger from a group of guys that are going to carjack him. And nobody that looks like me walks alone in that neighborhood in that decade unless he's trying to buy drugs or unless he's armed.
Yeah.
So the cops see both of us and figure this guy's not afraid. He's got a weapon. So while we're having a three-way discussion trying to explain this back to Blue Conservative, why cops are routinely going after anomalous masculine men. The whole thing is I'm not a paragon of masculinity or anything, but I would walk by a group of guys, okay? And when cops see that, they're like, oh, okay, they must know he's packing a gun, so let's go roll up on him.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the young man that I was, at the time, was 15, 16. I was training with him in the same boxing gym. So that's how this book starts, and it doesn't conclude about the why or anything, or even what ends up becoming of Baltimore. That's in later books, but this was pretty much about my experience and the experience of my friends during the purge.
Like I said, that's the overview. We'll go into each book after this. This is sort of like a setup vid, because also in terms of change, right? You didn't want to write about this stuff.
I was trying to write novels and accidentally getting roped into writing history. And in the meantime, this is a time when I would write and publish between 3 and 26 articles a day, or chapters on my site. And it would typically be, one article would be getting to work last night, not getting robbed. And then the next article would be like, getting home from work in the morning and not getting robbed. Okay, and that's it. So that's 2 right there. Then I go down to the grocery store to get some hot dogs and Chef Boyardee, and 3 guys try to bank me by a light post. So then that's an article.
Yeah.
That I've got to write that. And then Sensei Steve is like,
Yeah, Sensei Steve.
I want your opinion on this. I want to read it on your site tomorrow.
Yeah.
So then there's that article. And then I got people writing in on a website. So I've done like 20 books that were basically collections of articles and ideas that weren't my ideas. I was just executing stuff for my readers who are busy working and didn't have time to write it themselves.
Yeah, because people wanted to know what's going on in Baltimore, like because you were there, so it kind of roped you back into the kind of writing you did from the beginning.
A quarter of my readers came from this.
Wow.
My editor came from this. People found JamesLaFond.com because there was no news coming out of Baltimore.
Yeah.
It wasn't a clown show about
Yeah.
what was going on. At the time, it's the only city where there's riots.
Yeah.
It was a clinic for what happened in 2020.
Oh, man.
And interestingly, there were no riots in Baltimore in 2020 because Baltimore had become so dangerous, it was not safe for federal contractors to take a flatbed truck, a forklift, and pallets of bricks and position them in different places where they were going to be needed. It was just too unsafe for that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, well, all right. We'll go through each book briefly. I should read a passage from each one, but we'll see how this goes.